Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskityam Naram Chevam Narotayam Devi Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaya Uddaye Nistaprayetu Adveshu Nistyam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Nistike. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Talks between Narada and King Parichinna Text 1. King Parichinabhavi replied, My dear Lord, we could not appreciate completely the purpose of your allegoric story of the king Purunjana. Actually, those who are perfect in spiritual knowledge can understand, but for us who are overly attached to future activities, to realize the purpose of your story is very difficult. Text 2. The great sage Narada Muni continued, You must understand that Puranjana, the living entity, transmigrated according to his own work into different type of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, or many-legged, or simply leggedless. Transmigration into these various type of bodies, the living entity as the so-called enjoyer is known as Paranjana. Text 3. The person I have described as unknown in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of eternal friend of the living entity. Since the living entity cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlasting unknown to the conditioned soul. Text 4. When the living entity wants to enjoy the mode of material nature in the totality, he prefers out of many bodily forms to accept the body which has 9 gates, 2 hands, 2 legs. Thus, he prefers to become a human being or a demigod. Text 5. The great sage Narada continued. The word Paramananda mentioned in this regards refers to material intelligence or ignorance. It is to be understood as such. When one takes shelter to this kind of intelligence, he identifies himself with the material body. Influenced by the material consciousness of I and mine, he begins to enjoy and suffers through his senses. Thus, the living entity is entrapped. Text 6. The 5 working senses and the 5 senses that acquire knowledge are all male friends of Paranjana. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activities. The engagement of the senses are known as girlfriends, and the serpents, which are described as having 5 heads in the life, air, acting within the 5 circulatory processes. Text 7. The 11 attendant, who is the commander of the others, is known as the mind. He is the leader of the senses, both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of the work. The Panchal kingdom is that atmosphere in which the 5 senses objects are enjoyed. Within the Panchal kingdom is the city of the body, which has 9 gates. Text 8. The eyes, nostril, and ears are pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genital, and rectum are also different gates, being placed into a body having these 9 gates. The living entity acts externally in the material world and enjoys sense objects like form and taste. Text 9. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth, altogether 5, are situated in the front. The right ear is accepted as the southern gate, and the left ear is the northern gate. The two holes or gates situated in the west are known as the rectum and genital. The 2 gates, namely Kadoyatta and Avirak of Mukhya, which have been spoken to the two eyes side by side in one place. The town name Vibhurajyati should be understood as form. In this way, the two eyes are always engaged in seeing different kind of forms. The two doors named Nalini and Nalini should be known as two nostrils, and the city name Sarubhava represents aroma. The compassion spoken of the avidutta in the sense of smell. The door called mukhya is the mouth, and mukha is the mouth, and vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasajana is a sense of taste. Rasana. Rasana is the sense of taste. The city called Apana represents engagement of the tongue in speech, and Buddha is the variety of foodstuff. The right ear is called the gate of Pituha, and the left ear is called the gate of Dufwa. Prabhuji, I'm supposed to read until text 11. I think I've gone over one. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Yeah, whenever you're ready, Krishna and Prabhu, you can start, Prabhuji.
Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for joining today's Bhagavatam session. And thank you, Atyalabala Sri Radha Mataji, for reading today's Bhagavatam section translations. And thank you, Sundarana Prabhu, for giving this opportunity to purify myself. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 29th chapter, titled Talks Between Narada and King Prachinabari. So we'll start with the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanasalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschaptadeshitarani. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarunda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we are starting a new chapter. This is very important and very helpful chapter because Narada Muni is going to explain the allegorical story that he has narrated to King Prachinabari. So we're in the section of Narada Muni is teaching to King Prachinabari. So we have heard how Narada Muni indirectly enlightened King Prachinabari through the story of King Puranjana. So King Puranjana, who is indulged in sense gratification activities while leaving the body, so he was thinking about the body related things, especially in this case, he was thinking about his wife. Due to that, so he took birth as a woman in the next life, Vaidarbhi. And then we heard how she got married to Malayadhwaja, and then how Malayadhwaja left the kingdom and went to forest and practiced Krishna consciousness and perfected his life. And then how Vaidarbhi, the daughter of King Vidarbha, so performed funeral rites. And then when she was about to enter, how the old friend of King Puranjana, who is the Supreme Lord, Super Soul, so enlightened her with the spiritual knowledge. And then she, based on that knowledge, she again situated in her original Krishna consciousness. With that, the King Puranjana story was completed in the last chapter. And now in this chapter, at a very high level, we hear the Narada Muni giving explanation of the allegorical story, because King Prachinabari was not able to understand. And also Narada Muni stresses after explaining to perform bhakti yoga, not to indulge in the sense gratification activities, and requests him to take shelter of Krishna. And then based on the instructions of Narada Muni, we hear how King Prachin Barhi molded his activities in such a way that he performed continuously the bhakti yoga activities and perfected his life. So we'll start from the sloka 1 today, and we'll go up to 11 slokas. In the first sloka, we hear that King Prachin Barhi, after hearing the allegorical story, was here mentioning that could not appreciate completely the purport of your allegorical story, because people who are only in the perfect spiritual knowledge can understand. But since King Prachinbar is mentioning about himself that he is overly attached to fruity activities, so realizing the purpose of this King Puranjana story is very difficult for him. So I'm sure, I think the people in this Kali Yuga are most of the conditioned living entities, at least I speak myself, are in this situation. Of course, before I come to Krishna consciousness, don't have this spiritual knowledge. Of course, even today also, I only know very little bit. So at that time, I think that whatever the activities I am doing that are accurate or correct, because I don't know what is the good karma, what is bad karma, or what activities fall under the category of bad karma, or what are the activities fall under the good karma, like that. So if I look at and I see that most of the activities that I do fall under the bad karma only, because I did not offer the bhoga that prepared to Supreme Lord Krishna, or even though Krishna is providing many things for all of us, I don't have any gratitude. Hence, there is no process of chanting, or sometimes eating meat, or sometimes intoxication. So all these things, because we don't have this wonderful knowledge. So I speak myself, indulged in sense gratification, and mostly falls under the category of the sinful activities. But I never felt that I am doing anything wrong until a devotee touched me mercifully, gave this knowledge. Then slowly started realizing. So it took a long time. Of course, still I know very little bit. So when the devotee was preaching to us in a direct manner itself, we could not able to take it. I could not able to take it um, very fast or sincerely, seriously. Still struggling. Then what to speak here? Narada Muni gave the story of King Puranjana, this allegorical story, to King Prachin Barhi. Then it's very difficult to understand, at least for myself. So since we are very fortunate, because Srila Prabhupada gave the purports in that allegorical story, how to understand. So at least we have some idea. So, but without that purports, it's very difficult a conditioned living entity like me to understand the purpose of the story. So it's the same situation where King Prachin Barhi is now. So he is mentioning that here, that whatever Narada Muni is mentioning is very difficult to understand for him. Only the devotees can able to understand. So he's requesting Narada Muni to enlighten, or to give the purpose of this. So, and Prabhupada mentions that, as long as one is attached to the fruitive activities, so they are under the influence of the three modes. Then Krishna mentions them, right? One is in the influence of the three modes, then for them it is very difficult to understand. Mohitam na vichanati, like Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita. Whoever in the influence of the mode of these three modes, they will not be able to understand. And in this Kali Yuga, most of them, they are performing the sinful activities, most of the conditioned living entities, because they don't have this wonderful knowledge. And in the second sloka, we see that Narada Muni started explaining, saying that to understand Puranjana is the living entity who transmutes according to his own work into different types of bodies. So sometimes one-legged body, sometimes two-legged, three-legged, four-legged. many-legged or simply legless. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport that the one-legged means it's a ghostly-like body, ghostly body. Two-legged means human beings, and three-legged means when a human being becomes very old, and then he cannot walk with his two legs, and he needs help with a stick. Then it's called three-legged. And four-legged means animal type of living entities, and many-legged means some species insects. They have many legs. So, and legless means snakes. They don't have any legs. They just crawl. So, and scripture says that we have 8.4 million types of bodies. So, and based on the karma, what we have, so the living entity would be awarded one of the body. Karmana daiva netrena jentru deho pattaya, like that, So based on our previous karma, one would get one type of body. Jalajana Lakshana, like we have different types of bodies. We have 900,000 types of bodies in the water, aquatics. Similarly, we have insects, bees, and then birds, plants, trees, and human beings, like that. So one of the body would be given to the conditioned living entity who has desires to enjoy in this material world. And Prabhupada mentions that Puranjana means who enjoys possessing different types of bodies, so various types of bodies. So a conditioned living entity who has the mentality of enjoying in this material world, so he is accommodated by these different types of bodies. Krishna mercifully gives different types of bodies because we have a desire to enjoy. And of course, more than enjoyment, we go through a lot of suffering in this material world. And then in the third sloka, Narada Muni mentions that the person whom he is described as unknown is the Supreme Person of Godhead. So the master and eternal friend of the living entity. And so since the living entities cannot realize the Supreme Lord by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlastingly unknown to the conditioned soul. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport that Supreme Lord cannot be understand by our material senses. So that's why he's known as unknown to the conditioned soul. So that's why sometimes he's mentioned in the Vedic literature as Nirakara or Avijnata. In this story, he is mentioned as Avijnata. And sometimes he is also mentioned in the Vedic literature Avan Manasa Gochara, like that. Because, and Prabhupada also mentions that Nirakara means sometimes people think that no form. The Supreme Lord doesn't have any form like that. But instead, he has a spiritual form, Sachidananda Vigraha. Like, Lord Brahma also mentions in his prayer that Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. So he has the spiritual form, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And it means that his form cannot be understood by the materialistic person. And Prabhupada also quotes from Padma Purana the sloka saying that Ata Sri Krishna Nahamadi Nabhaved Grafyam Indriya Sevonmukhe Jishvada Swayam Eva Sprute Adaha. Like, one cannot understand Krishna with his material senses. Krishna will reveal himself to his devotees now, because they are engaged in his transcendental loving service. And same thing Krishna also mentions in Bhagavad Gita. Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati. Like, he is only understood by the devotees. So not by the other category of people. And Prabhupada also mentions another point that Krishna has many names. But apart from the devotees, other categories like karmis or jnanis, they intermingle the demigods' names with Krishna. They think that any name can be taken, but that is not correct. So that's why in this sloka there is one specific word is mentioned. Nama Bhirva Kriya Gunai. Like, the Lord has a specific names like Rama Adi Murti Sukalani Menatistan, like so Lord Ramchandra, Narsimha, Matsya Avatar, Kurma Avatar, Atokshaja, Murari, Narayana, Vishnu, like that. So those are the names that the Supreme Lord has. But as long as one is indulged in sense gratification or attached to the materialistic activities, has the desire to enjoy independent of Krishna, then they cannot be able to understand the potency or the importance of this Supreme Lord's holy names. And in the fourth sloka, Narada Muni mentions that when the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in totality, so he prepares out of many bodily forms to accept the body which has 9 gates, 2 hands and 2 legs. So he prefers to become a human being or a demigod. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport that this verse indicates how a spiritual being who is a part and parcel of Krishna accepts a material body which has 9 gates, 2 hands and 2 legs, because he has a desire to enjoy the modes of material nature. Krishna also mentions in Bhagavad Gita, right? So Icha Dvesha Samuktena, like, so the living entity has a desire to enjoy independent of Krishna or envious of Krishna. Then he will fall down from the spiritual world into this material world. So hoping that he will enjoy here, but then he realizes, how much suffering will be there. And Prabhupada also mentions that from this verse, it is to be understood that when one comes from the spiritual world into this material world, he prefers to become a human being. So or a demigod. So in some places I heard that, sometimes living entity, when he falls down from the spiritual world to this material world, initially sometimes he gets a body of a Lord Brahma. So he gets the Lord Brahma position, or some powerful Prajapatis like that. But if he misutilizes his independence that he has given, and he indulges in sense gratification activities, doesn't take up the process of bhakti, then he will fall down into the lower forms. So many bodily forms enter, aquatics and insects, beasts, birds, like that. So he will fall down into the lower forms. Then he will go through the evaluation process, and slowly after the evaluation forms process completes, then he will get another chance of he gets a human form. Then we can understand from this how important it having a human form. Durlabhamanava janma. So on top of that, whoever got the association of a devotees, satsanga, we can understand, how fortunate and how important that one who has a human form and the association of the devotees. So if he misses the opportunity of having a human form, or he doesn't utilize this human form to go back home, back to Godhead, then he will miss the opportunity of going back home, back to Godhead. Then he will again go through the cycle of birth and death. And another point mentions Prabhupada mentions that so he wants to enjoy the material nature in totality. The other forms of the 8.4 million species, other forms like aquatics or beasts, birds, or trees, all those things, they have a strong tendency to enjoy only one kind of sense enjoyment. But in the human form, there is a strong tendency to enjoy all the senses. So that's why he prefer as a human being or a demigod. And we hear from the scriptures how the conditioned living entity who is in the other form, by trying to enjoy with one sense itself, how they get destroyed. Like, suppose the fish, it has a tendency to enjoy the sense of eating. It utilizes the mouth for eating. So that's why the fisherman, he puts some little bit of food to the hook, and then he will throw into the water. And though the fish has a lot of things in the river or ocean, so it still goes to that to eat that, unable to control the tongue, and then it tries to eat, and then it is caught up to that hook, and then the fisherman takes out, and the fish is died. See, one kind of sense enjoyment, the strong tendency to enjoy that one sense enjoyment is causing a fish to die, death. So then what to speak? A human being has a strong tendency to enjoy all the senses. So then if we are not careful of utilizing our senses in a proper way, then our destruction will be very faster. So one will be destroyed very fast. So that's why Krishna recommends to regulate our senses, not to indulge in sense gratification. And Prabhupada gave 4 regulative principles, right? No meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex, like that. So regulate our senses, and not only that, it's important to regulate senses, and equally important to practice the spirituality, to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, so that the desire to enjoy will also go away. So because as long as the desire to enjoy is there, then we will go through the repeated birth and death. And Prabhupada mentions that the tendency, the enjoyment. So in the next sloka, we see that the Narada Muni continues that the pramada, the word mentions here, is a material intelligence, which is called ignorance. And Prabhupada mentions that the material intelligence, which is called buddhi. So even the materialistic peoples also has intelligence, but that's called here as a ignorance. Like the scientists inventing so many things. So it's also intelligence, but it's a material intelligence. And in reality, it is called as ignorance. So that's why when the intelligence is diverted to Krishna, Krishna consciousness, that is called buddhi yoga. And Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that dadami buddhi yoga. So he will give the real intelligence to the people who satatiptanam bhajatam priti purvakam. So whoever engages in Krishna's worship or the spirituality, then they would get the real intelligence. So when we start, when we take a step towards Krishna, our journey towards Krishna, then Krishna would give real intelligence. What is that real intelligence would help? So that real intelligence would help to escape all miseries of this material world. And then we'll go back home, back to Godhead. So if not, then it is mentioned as a pramada. So the material intelligence. So material intelligence would make us to identify oneself as I and mind, like that, only related to bodily things, I and mind. So that's why the pure devotee Kanakadasa, he mentions that if I can go, then I may go to the spiritual world. The first I means that identifying ourselves to the material body, like, so my family, my wealth, properties, or name, fame, anything related to bodily thing. If that can go away, that I can go away, then the real I, the spirit soul, then can go back home, back to God. So, and Prabhupada mentions that how this material intelligence, or which is polluted, can be purified. That has been given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he recommended to chant this Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Then our polluted consciousness can be purified, and then Krishna will give the real intelligence. And in the next sloka, 6th, so you see that the 5 working five senses that acquire knowledge, they are all male friends of Puranjani. So, and now Narada Muni is explaining the allegorical story. So these 5 working senses, the hands, legs, the tongue, rectum, genitals, they're all 5 working senses. And then the 5 acquiring knowledge senses, the Jnanendriyas, eyes, ears, nose, skin, and tongue. So those are the 5 acquiring senses. They are the mentioned in the story of King Puranjana as the male friends of Puranjani. And then we also see that the serpent is the life air, and it has a 5 heads. So those 5 heads are the 5 types of life air, like prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And so Narada Muni explaining what are they, like that. And the 11th attend, the 7th sloka, we see that in the 11th attend, the commander of others is known as the mind. Is the leader of the senses, both in acquisition of knowledge and performance of work. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport that here the mind is mentioned as the Brodh Bala. It's very powerful. the command of the others. And even in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna also mentions that, Pramati Balavadhram, the mind is very difficult to control. It's because it's very strong. It's very difficult to control. So he can control a heavy wind, but not the mind like that. Of course, we hear Krishna mentioning that it can be controlled through the Abhyasa Yogi, through the practice, everyday, daily practice. So that's why it is stressed by Acharyas to chant this Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day. So every day. That would help us to develop Yukta Vairagya. So then we will able to engage whether our senses or our any resources that we have in the activities of Krishna consciousness. So in that way, we can make the mind as a best friend. Otherwise, it will be a worst enemy. So we don't want to be with the worst enemy, because worst enemy, when there is an opportunity, it will kill. So that's why we want to make a mind as a best friend. So the way to make the mind best friend is Bhajya Hore Mana Sri Nandanandana. So to chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So in the text 8, you see that the eyes, nostrils, and ears, the pace of gates situated in one place, and mouth, genitals, rectums, different gates. And the being placed body having these 9 gates, the living entity externally in the material world enjoys the sense objects like a form and taste. We see that, not knowing that we are a powerful spirit soul, but identifying ourselves with the material body, we are trying to enjoy this material body, which has 9 gates under the direction of the mind, which is polluted. And then we have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth, 5 situated in the front. And we have a right ear, southern gate, left ear, northern gate, and the 2 holes are gates situated in the west, known as the rectum and genital organ. So Narada Muni explaining all these gates, what they are like that. And Prabhupada mentioned that out of all these gates, the eastern gate is very important, because it has the 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth like that. And then in the text 10, Narada Muni explains the other gates named Kadhyota and Avirmukhi. They are the 2 eyes side by side, and the town named Vibharachita should be understood as a form. This way, the 2 eyes are always in the engaged in seeing a different kinds of forms. And Prabhupada mentions that the living entity uses his senses for the sense gratification activities of seeing the different forms. And we see an example of one of the species like this firefly. So when it uses the sense of seeing for his sense gratification, like it likes to see when the candle is flame is happening, it likes to see that form, and it doesn't stop seeing from far distance. It wants to go closer, and as it goes closer, it is attracted more and more, and then finally it falls down into that fire and dies. So when the sense of seeing is used in the sense gratification activity for our own pleasure, then it will cause destruction, like how fish was destructed using the mouth sense of eating for the pleasure of oneself. So similarly, the firefly also got destroyed if it is utilized in the sense pleasure. So the perfect way used to use our seeing is to see the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So that way our eyes gets purified. And then the 2 doors named Nalini and Nalini are the 2 nostrils. And the city named Saurabha represents aroma. And the companion spoken of Avadhuta is a sense of smell. And the door called Mukhya is the mouth. And Vipana is the faculty of speech. And Rasagna is the sense of taste. So here Narada Muni explained different types of characters that he has mentioned in the King Puranjana story. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport that Avadhuta doesn't follow any rules and regulation, because it doesn't fall under that category. He's above those rules and regulations. So similarly, the nostril also enjoy the sense of smell without impediment. And similarly, the tongue also, it tries to taste all kinds of relation footstep. And as long as we use these senses for our sense gratification, for our own pleasure, then we will be destroyed. But when we engage them in all the senses, how Ambarish Maharaj used in the Krishna service, then we become liberated. So we can go back home, back to God, and escape all the problems. So I'll pause it here. In the next session, we'll hear more about Narada Muni's spiritual alignment to Prachina Barhyasi. So thank you all for giving this opportunity. Grandhara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vranda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krishna and Prabhuji. Wonderful class, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.